Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Rittner. I'm a writer, educator, communication strategist. I'm here with Design Milk for DMTV Milkshake. Okay, I had a lot of bowls, and I decided to go with this one because it made me think of my mother's kitchen, and that just feels like a very comforting place to think about these days. All right, here we go. Do you have any books, podcast, essay recommendations for designers who want to begin educating themselves on design for social impact? I do. When I teach, one of the books that I recommend that my students require them to read, is Sugar in the Raw by Rebecca Carroll. She's just a tremendous writer, and this book takes the reflections of about a dozen young black girls, teenagers, and asks them to reflect on, their lives. What does it mean to be them and to navigate the world? And these are stories coming from all over the United States, and you really get an interesting range of stories. Young people of different ages, living in different places, having different concerns, a lot of intersectional questions. And it's, I think, really useful to hear them talk in their own voice. The podcast Uncivil by Chenjerai Kumanyika and Jack Hitt is just a beautiful reveal of the ways in which systemic racism affects so many systems that we have to navigate. Anything written by Nicole Hannah-Jones in the New York Times. Her conversations around segregation, discrimination, and education in particular, as probably you know, she led the 1619 Project. And I think that I've been thinking about Spike Lee's documentary When the Levees Broke, and again, kind of just unraveling the ways in which design, in all the ways that we think about it, impacted the outcome of a natural disaster, right? And so human-made disasters that compound natural disasters. Okay, let's see. How is the success of design for social impact projects measured? Yeah, not effectively, I think, is the answer to that question. I don't think that there are very useful measures. I think that if people want to really think about what it means to measure the success of those projects, they're going to have to do a radical rethinking about time, the kind of time it takes to actually understand how these projects actually come into being. And so we often measure success at launch because the design team thinks that it was a success and it looks good, people are happy, and the client is happy, but what does that really mean for that to be successful? Like, social impact has a long tail, right? So you need to look at it a year out, 2 years out, 5 years out, and so on. Can you name a few other design for social impact topics outside of police brutality and systemic racism that designers can use their design superpowers to enable change? Yeah, I looked at that question, and so beforehand, so I came up with a list that I thought I would share with you. All right, other design for social value topics. Gender equity in the workplace, in tech, and across the media landscape, not only in messaging for girls and women, but in terms of how gender is portrayed in any way that isn't representative or inclusive of complex reality. The silencing, narrow representations, and cultural appropriation of Native American and Indigenous communities for personal gain at the expense of those communities' access to credit, compensation, and wealth creation. Xenophobia and the labeling of specific groups as exotic as a construct for othering and diminishing cultural experience. Ableism and the disabling effects of design that disadvantage many forms of bodily difference. Environmental injustice that disproportionately disadvantages people who are already marginalized by racism and inadequate access to wealth and health care. Consumer values over civic values, or put more simply, valuing products over people, and in particular the corrosive repercussions of new thing nowism. Individualism over collective action, or put more simply, valuing I accomplishments over the long, hard work it takes, in which no one takes credit and everyone does their part, and no external measures of success are required. The criminalization of poverty that disproportionately affects Black, Brown, and immigrant communities. Anti-science activism, including the consumerization of anti-science products and services, and I'll call out Goop specifically there because of how much I really despise that product or service or whatever we want to call that. Technologies that are designed for maximum harm, including but not limited to addictive features on apps for adults and children. The belief that polarization is the other side's problem, illiberal liberalism and the hypocrisies of progressive privilege, limited performative empathy, and lastly, design thinking methodologies or human-centered design methodologies that serve as colonizing mechanisms rather than platforms for personal community agency, inclusion, representation, and equity. It's a pretty long list. It could go on. Name one of your favorite designs for social impact projects. Can be historical or new or on any social impact topic. You know, so for me, what Antoinette Carroll and her team are doing at Creative Reaction Lab, I think, is just on the mark. And I would also point out the work Mark Dones and their team are doing at the National Innovation Service. And I think the reason is that the work is not about output as object, but about developing methodologies for bringing people in very inclusive ways to build a self-agency, right? To learn what design means in the context of their own lives, their own experience, their own communities. And so the work they're doing is not trying to fix other people's problems, but actually provide tools, methodologies, a language for confidence around self-liberation, so just defining success for oneself, making things that are self-negotiated. It's not exactly the right way to say it, but I think you know what I mean. What immediate actions can design firms and individual designers take to effectively take a stand against social justice issues like police brutality and systemic racism? Learn. Talk to people. Listen. Importantly, don't talk at people. Listen to people. Go places that are really uncomfortable and listen and reflect, and then talk to people who are different from yourself and hear what they have to say. Don't think you have to be in the center of it, and don't think you have to solve their problems, but knowing that as a designer, there are tools that you have available to you to enable change in particular ways. Try to imagine how you might adapt those tools to help communities that really are in need. I think the best thing you can do is to listen to the organizations, activist organizations, advocacy organizations that have been doing this work for a long time. They know what they need. They know what it takes to make change. They've been talking about these things for you know, decades, decades and decades. And I think what they are often are looking for are design teams that will come in and hear them and help activate what they are already identifying as possibilities and potential solutions. Do you have any advice for design firms, companies, and designers who want to publicize a written statement against police brutality and systemic racism? Yeah, my answer is don't do that. I don't think we need to hear from more people saying the same thing. But I do think that, again, there are organizations in your community, anti-racist organizations, activists, advocates in your communities who are making statements based on work they have been doing for a long time. Don't write a new statement. Ask those organizations if actually you can point your communities to them. Let their statements speak to what is happening. You don't really need to be in the middle of it if it's not the work you're already doing. I think if it's the work you have been doing, then you should speak about what is coming from you, from your heart, right? And from your experience. But I think that more effectively, you have an opportunity to use the platforms you have to raise up those people, those communities, and those organizations that are already doing that work in much more sustained and embedded in community ways. Okay, in an article you wrote for SVA, I don't know what it was, you stated that unlike design that sells a product, design for social justice requires unlike design that sells a product, design for social justice requires that openness to the messy inconvenience of human existence. Something. Okay, so I'm not reading that question right, but can you expand upon the statement? I would, if I could remember it, but I think that what I'm saying there is that design thinking and design methodologies often make things sound neat, contained, and containable. And I think that actually what really good design thinking do is open itself up to all the messy and inconvenient ways in which people engage complexly and intersectionally in life, in all aspects of life. And so what we need is for people to think in terms of adaptation constantly. And that means also pushing the boundaries of what is comfortable for you as a designer, letting other people guide the process, not being the loudest voice in the room, not laying your methodology on top of other people's problems, but actually allowing the problems and the problem space to guide what the methodology for design change can look like. And so I think what I'm holding up there is the imperfection of process. And my 10 minutes are up. So I thank you very much, and I thank Design Milk and DMTV. Bye.